Morning, everyone. First of all, let me say thank you for being understanding and accommodating, and let me change the schedule around you at the last minute. I really do appreciate that. What we're going to do with the schedule going forward is to move the next two classes by one. So today is 4D. What we're going to cover is 4D, and that will be covered today, 225. Activity 2 will be covered March 2nd, and then exam 1 will push forward to March 9th. Now that means the QR project introduction, that's going to be displaced. And so what I think will work for that is that I will create another video lecture that explains the project, goes through what I'm expecting for that assignment. I do some examples of good quantitative writing, and I think I can put that all in video for you to watch. In fact, that might be a useful resource to come back to as you work on the project. So that might actually be a good idea anyway. And then so the exam will be on March 9th, and I will post the materials for this right after that, and also create some extra office hours in that week following the exam so that you can come ask questions, because I'm sure there will be some questions about what you can do for that project and getting ideas and really thinking about getting started with the project. So there'll be some extra time available for you to talk with me about that if you wish. And then from March 11th forward, my hope, fingers crossed, is that the schedule will be back to what it is on the syllabus, and we'll just be able to follow that for the rest of the semester. So that is the current plan. Now today we're going to talk about loans and loan payments and credit cards and mortgages, and basically borrowing money. This is something that you all will likely have to do or are already doing, whether it's because you have a credit card or you're borrowing money for college. So this is a pretty common thing, and it's important to understand how loans work and how to pay them back and how to balance that with saving money, the things that we were talking about in the last lecture. So first, a loan in general typically has a principal and a term. The principal is the amount that you owe at any time. So this is a little bit different than the way we've used it before, where the principal was like a fixed amount, and you just you forecasted what it will be later on down the road. The principal is the amount that you owe at any time, and that determines what your payments would be to pay it back within the term. So there's a fixed length of time to pay it back, and that's known as the term of the loan. So an example of a loan like this would be a car loan, which is often 60-month period, a 5-year loan. And a typical amount, although I don't know if there is a typical amount, but a typical amount for a car loan is around $18,000. So you could borrow $18,000, and the lender would give you 60 months to pay that back with a certain interest rate. And the payments would be determined by this formula, which is known as the loan payment formula for an installment loan, which is also known as a amortized loan. PMT, just like in the savings plan, stands for payment. In this case, this is what you're paying each month to pay back what you owe. In the savings plan formula is what you are paying into the savings account. P is the principal, which is what you owe. APR and N have their usual meaning, annual percentage rate, so that's the interest rate, and N is the number of times you are paying, or the frequency of times that you're paying per year. And typically, as with savings, it's 12. We typically do things monthly. And then Y is the term. Y is how long you have to pay back that loan. So if you plug in what you owe, the interest rate, say 12 for the 12 payments per year, and Y is the number of years that you have to pay it back. So if it was a 60-month car loan, you'd have to put Y equals 5. You'd plug all those things in, And the formula would tell you what your monthly payment would be. Now, credit cards are a very specific type of loan. There's no term. When you borrow money using a credit card, you are essentially saying you will pay it back with interest in the future, but that in the future is indeterminate. And in fact, the credit card company would probably prefer if you take as long as possible to pay it back. So instead of using this formula, the credit card company says, okay, you bought something for $3,000, you now have 5 years to pay it back. They'll say instead, okay, you bought something for $5,000, you need to at least pay us for the interest and then a little bit more. And so that's called the minimum monthly payment of the loan. So it's not calculated by this formula with the intent of you paying it back in a specific term. It's basically just to cover the interest so that your account balance is not growing over time. Now, credit cards can be used with that formula if you want to determine how much you should pay in order to pay it off. So with credit card debt, the credit card company isn't going to say you have to pay this off in 5 years or you have to pay this off in 2 years, but you personally might feel overwhelmed by a credit card debt and say, I need to get this paid off in 2 years or 5 years. And if that's the case, you could go back to this formula and figure out how much you would need to pay in order to make that happen. Okay. Now, credit cards, because of their ease of access and the fact that they're not requiring you to pay it back within a given term, can get people into a lot of trouble. But this is an industry that's regulated, and it's good to know what the laws are around credit cards. And so I put a link here to the usury laws that are dealing with credit cards so that you can inform yourself on that if this is a specific concern for you. But I think for almost everyone, you will have a credit card, so there will be a time where you could just pay the minimum monthly payment on it. But the question is that the right thing to do? Is it better to have a goal to pay it off and to figure out how much you need to pay? Last thing on credit cards is that they typically have much higher rates than any other type of loan. So any type of borrowing money. An auto loan, you might pay 2% or 3% or 4%. A credit card, you might pay 9% or 10% or 20% on that credit card. And most people don't know what the interest rate is on their credit card. If you have a credit card, ask yourself, do you know what the interest rate is? Now, if you use the credit card and are very, very good about paying it off immediately, you can actually use them without paying any interest at all. So if you purchase something and then pay it off right away, then you're not paying the credit card any interest, and maybe the interest doesn't matter in that case. But due to the flexibility of the credit cards, you pay for that with higher interest rates. So if you do carry a balance, have a principal that needs to be paid off, that interest can accrue pretty rapidly. Okay. Now, the last specific type of loan that I want to cover is called a mortgage, which is an installment loan, but specifically for a home purchase. And I want to cover this because there's some additional language around this type of loan that is important to know. First, it requires a down payment, or most, I should say, most, not all mortgages, but most mortgages require a down payment. Cars typically also require a down payment, but for a mortgage, for a home loan, that down payment is typically 10 to 20% of the purchase price. And I think on the safe end, in order to get the best interest rates, you usually want 20%. So if you're trying to buy a house in the future and you want to plan it as well as possible, the amount you'd want to have saved is at least 20% of the purchase price. Let's say just to make the numbers easy, the house you want to buy is $100,000, then that means before you buy it, it would be great if you had $20,000 in the bank. Then when you go to get a loan, you would have the required down payment so that you would qualify for the best interest rates. Now, the down payment is not a fee, so it doesn't get attached to the price. No, it's not like if you bought a $100,000 home and the down payment was 20%. It's not that the house cost $120,000. It's that you would put that down payment towards the price of the house, so you'd only have $80,000 left to pay. But there are some costs that go in addition to the cost of the home, and those are known as closing costs. Closing referring to closing of the loan, so the signing of all the documents where you agree to borrow the money and pay it back within the given term. And those closing costs have a variety of different sources. There can be fees for appraisal, credit check. You're using often a lawyer to look at these things. So there's a bunch of associated fees that get wrapped into closing costs. And then there are other complicating factors. For example, some loans give you the option to pay percentage points of the loan. Usually it's just referred to as paying points, in exchange for a lower interest rate. So they might have some special rate that they're offering, like 2.5% on the mortgage. But in order to get that 2.5% interest rate, you have to pay a point. What that means is that you would take the cost of the home, take that percentage point, and add an additional amount. So if it was 1 point, that would be 1%. And if the home was $100,000, that means now your home is actually $101,000. You're paying that extra $1,000 or 1% to have the privilege of the lower interest rate. So there are various options, and really it's a matter of figuring out down the road, how long am I going to take to pay this back? How much lower is the interest rate? How much can I afford to put down? All of those factors will determine how much you actually end up paying for the home. And so it's good to understand the circumstances, know the options, and know what you're able to do so that you can forecast and see how it plays out over the term of the loan. You can save yourself a lot of money that way. Now, I would say a lot of money. Homes, typical middle-class homes now are in the $300,000, $400,000 range. And so you're talking about a very, very good chunk of money, and small changes in percentage interest rates can make big changes in the amounts. And so just by smartly doing things, you can save yourself even $100,000 or more by going with a better loan option, or putting a little bit more money down, or paying slightly more over a shorter period of time, paying more per month over a shorter period of time. Now, I've mentioned the term of these mortgage loans. With that, there are fixed rate mortgages and adjustable rate mortgages. In a fixed rate mortgage, it's just like it sounds, the interest rate is the same for the entire term. Mortgage terms are usually 15 or 30 years, so the fixed rate would be the same interest rate for 15 years or for 30 years. An adjustable rate mortgage is just like it sounds, where the lender has the capability to adjust the rate within certain guidelines. There are laws around this, but for example, let's say they could increase the rate by 0.5% per year up to a total of 10%. And so the adjustable rate might start out really low. Let's say it starts out at 2.5%, but then after 5 years, they're allowed to start raising it by 0.5% at maximum up to a certain maximum of 10%. That means they first period of time, your rate is fixed, but then it can fluctuate and probably will go up from that point forward. So So sometimes the adjustable rates are lower than the fixed rate, so people will go with them, but it is a bit of a gamble because it's not fixed. Okay. One reason to do that might be you're moving into an area, but you are very sure you're going to be leaving that area within the next 5 years or so. In that case, the adjustable rate isn't that much of a risk because by the time the rate starts going up, you'll be selling the property and moving somewhere else. And then one last option with mortgages, whether it's fixed rate or adjustable rate, you can always refinance to get a better rate or lower your payments. So you can basically take the current loan you have and pay it off with a new loan. So you owe $100,000, you borrow an additional $100,000 and pay that first $100,000 off. You still only owe $100,000. That's called refinancing. And the new loan might have a better rate, or maybe it'll have a longer term so that your payments are a little bit lower, or maybe you're looking to take out some additional money so you can do home improvements. You want to build an addition off the side of your house, so you take out an even bigger loan and use that extra cash. That's called home equity. Now, the important thing so you might think, well, why don't people refinance all the time? Why don't people refinance all the time? And that's because going back to, I guess I was on the right slide. Going back to here, there are closing costs. So whatever home loan you have, when you finalize that loan, when you sign all the documents, there are closing costs that you pay. And that's true whether it's the first time you're getting a mortgage for a house or you're refinancing to get a new mortgage for a house. So the trade-off is, do I want to pay closing costs, which might be a few $1,000s, in order to, take out maybe $30,000 to refurbish my kitchen? Is that a good trade-off? Or to get a half a point or a point lower interest rate, because down the road that might save me $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000. So these are kind of complicated questions that really depend on your individual circumstances. But it's good to know the options and what the terms mean, what the terminology means, and the term of the loan. Okay, so the next thing is to do some examples with these, and hopefully that will make everything a little more concrete. And I will split that off into a part 2 video.